So yes, that sentence makes sense. I can understand that, whether I agree with it or not. It has to be apparently with a beginning and an end. There is a continuity to it. It does not stop. There is, in the media, something else we've mentioned, if you can stretch it right quick. These kinds of things that we've even noted, taking like a local news show or any kind of news show is a great one now, that they will continually put in promos and teasers, I think they still call them, of what's coming up. In other words, you got a 30-minute show, and God knows, I've never collected it, how much of that 30 minutes is spent of the usable time, the editorial time, of not actual news, but of saying what's coming up after the next commercial. And one time made a little joke that some of you liked, or maybe had Kairoot to point that in a secondary sense, if somebody was really, really subversively efficient, you could expand the teasers and the promos to 30 minutes and never have a show. And some of you laughed. And it wasn't just a joke, because that would be, in one sense, if you can, we've got to get beyond 3 dimensions, that would be the ultimate continuity, that you have transitioned yourself. That apparently you're going somewhere and you never go anywhere except there is a continuity to it. Stay tuned for these stories. After which, and they give a little promo, after which these stories will come up such and such, followed by, stay tuned by so-and-so. Well, I see our time's out. But at any rate, you could look at, and of course we could say from another psychological or city view, that doing that in the midst of a show is one way to cut down on expenses. Because the more time that you spend actually putting in promos and teasers about what's coming up, that stay tuned, because we'll be going live to Omaha. We'll be going live to Berlin to get the comments of so-and-so. Now, every time they can spend 15 seconds, and that's 15 seconds that they do not have to fill up with actual news. They just say what's coming up. So we could say, well, that's laziness. We could say that they're trying to save money. We could say it's inefficiency. Tut-tut. You could say that, but you could also say it is the height of efficiency. You could just say that you're so dumb that you're sitting there being a critic. You're being one part of life that's wanting to tell the other part, got you. You're saying, hi, trying to insult my intelligence. You know, especially since I pointed out to you, you sit there now and say, look what they're doing. I tuned in to watch the news. They're going to try to sell me products so that indirectly I end up paying for this. Even though it's over-the-air broadcasting, I am probably going to be influenced subliminally by the advertising and may go spend money. And so I am, in a sense, paying for this. And what an insult they attempt to do to my intelligence, because they are doing more and more, which they have been. More and more of these teasers about stay tuned, and they take up more and more of the time saying what's coming up rather than giving me the good news that I need. You could say that, but if you weren't part of that scenario, you could also say, my God, if I could be as efficient as that, whew. And it's not NBC and it's not ABC, it's that great network of LIFE. But there is a way in which you could see that these promos, these teasers in a show, in a program, and now program, leave us jump symbolically at least, and say into thing-oriented, episodic consciousness. That what this sort of thing does when you're picking up the tail end of somebody else's words, when you take their question and you use the question as part of your response, or instead of actually saying something, you keep saying what you're going to say. Stay tuned. I've got some great ideas. Stay tuned. You'll love them. This is a kind of hyper-efficiency at another level, because it takes what would otherwise be episodic consciousness and it gives it, at the very least, a kind of patina of seamlessness. Well, it's made up of these thing-oriented, episodic sentences that must have an apparent end, that must have an apparent object for the human intellect to continue to feed and to transfer information and energy. And yet, amidst that, it gives this kind of, if you ride by real fast with a carload of carpenters on a weekend, it gives almost this sensation that there is a kind of seamlessness to it. That you can, if you looked at it another way, turn on at whatever time, at 7 o'clock, and turn on the ABC News and sit through it all, commercials, warts, promos, teasers, the whole thing, and then at the end, 7:29, they're going off and rolling the credits, and feel as though, if you were asked in a certain way, that was the ABC News. That was a show. Of course, then you've got the kind of conclusiveness to the 30-minute show, but for that 30 minutes, it was like a seamlessness. I mean, you're used to it. You know that they're going to do certain kinds of promos. You know that maybe that network, I don't know, but maybe that one, not only will the anchor person say, coming up, stay tuned to such and such, they may be one of the ones, let's say that they do this consistently, that they even flash to Berlin, to the guy that's going to do the story, and even kill more time. That the anchor person says, all right, stay tuned, and we'll be going live to Berlin. Where? Are you there, Ralph? And they'll flash to Ralph, and Ralph will say yes, and he'll say, well, Ralph, you're going to be having the story about what's going on there post-elections. Yes, I will. And then they go back to the anchor guy, and they say, so stay tuned for a live report from good old Ralph live in Berlin. So now they've taken what could have been just a 10-second and drug it out to 30 seconds. All of that you could be accustomed to. Let us say that you are accustomed to watching the ABC News. So to you, there is a kind of real continuity. So let's say, and I'm not attacking that. There's no qualitative judgment involved, but let's say to you that is identifiable. If you were asked, that is the ABC News. Continuity. Outside the media, there's something else. The latest term for it is nothing all that new, but the latest term in our lifetime, last several decades, is psychologically, they were calling it, I guess it's still popular enough for you people to have heard of it, the stages of life. And several psychologists had some popular books, and they'd cut it up into 5 or 7 or whatever it was, that you were like a child, and then you were an adolescent, and then you were a young adult, and then you're middle age. And it was showing and trying to tell just in a kind of popular way to the mass audience that might buy a book and not necessarily go into analysis with the author, but showing what? A kind of continuity. That it is not unusual, people would say the author as he sat there on the show, it is not unusual to feel a kind of sudden little break once you leave home and you have to go to college. And you get there and you think, well, it's going to be great, I'll love it. And there's a kind of excitement, but be prepared for, what will we call it, mixed feelings. That you'll be there, and probably the first night or so that you're there in the dorm, and you're grown. I mean, you're a young adult, let's say. And so you're not actually frightened of being away from home, and yet there is a kind of longing, a kind of loss, that you're no longer the innocent young teenager that used to hold up in the bathroom with Playboy. You're now a young adult. And let's say you're a young adult, and then you fall in love, and then you get married. And you think, yes, I love this other person, I want to be with them, and yet the day you actually go through the marriage ceremony, and you get through, and you have a few glasses of wine, you get to the hotel, and you get all the rice, and maybe later you suddenly go in the bathroom, you look in the mirror, and you think, my God, what have I done? But the psychologist, all right, now follow. The psychologist then says not to be alarmed, because he is then, don't let your ordinary consciousness pull you away, or you'll think that I've taken the opposite position, which is all right. Except it's not. They call it the stages of life, and they say that all of this, although it would appear to be kind of distinct and oftentimes abrupt, abrasive, disturbing changes in your life, not to worry. There is a continuity because we all go through it. It is the stages, and all they're saying is there is a continuity. Conversely, if you'd like to look at it conversely, those of you that are not wearing kids, look at it from another view. How life simultaneously produces some of those great services, if not products, I'll leave it to you what you want to call it, known as booze and drugs. Not only produces it, but simultaneously, continually, has half a life going tut, tut, tut about booze. Let's just say booze, but drugs of all sorts. Since we all know that booze is a drug now, but let's say just booze right quick. The thing is, what does it do? I mean, besides make you act silly and dumb In a sense, what it does to just, let's say ordinary people, we're not talking about bums or alcoholics, just people who drink, sometimes socially. What does it do in a way that can be described vis-a-vis what we're talking about now? It interferes with individual continuity. That a person, just an average person that drinks, goes to a party once or twice a month or something, that kind of person, they can, if they have a little too many drinks, what do? Now this side of getting in a fist fight there with somebody they know or wrecking their car, but just what do? The continuity that everyone else that knows them, their mate, their friends, their employers and employees and people there that associate with, if it goes just a little bit too far, and it doesn't take much either way, the continuity of what they appear to be is interfered with. And assuming other people are less being disjointed in their continuity of their so-called personality, they find it disturbing, offensive, but they at least find it disturbing. You're not yourself. Think about it. That the continuity that, boy, I wish you wouldn't do that. Ooh. And of course, when it gets too far, I was stopping this far, fist fights and all that, but as you all know, common complaints, the woman says my old man gets drunk and he'll prone to come home and holler, "How come we don't have any peanut butter?" And then suddenly floor me. There is great value that's not identified as such, placed on continuity. People call it other things, and they're making their own observations, but it is not down to the level of the energy needs of feeding, of distributing energy inside the life of life through man, on the basis that there must be a continuity in the same way that there is a sexual and genetic continuity if we're talking about the primary level, but there's got to be one at the secondary level. You might also care to note that from this kind of view is another way to say that there is, based upon this, that there is no real everyday need or expectation of surprising, exciting speech or thought, ideas. There's not. Now, people will say otherwise. I know that because, again, you've got to remember that life has primed everyone, except the anomalies and the people at the fringe. But the middle of life's bell curve, life has primed everyone that their one desire in life, their one desire is to go to Quito. And nobody can get there. No matter what you do, Ecuador might as well be Shangri-La. You'll never get there. So remembering that, then I am obviously aware that people believe that they are seeking exciting ideas. What is entertainment? What is a large part of contemporary people in our part of the world? What is your time spent with if you're ordinary? A lot of it now is seeking to be entertained. I imagine that you don't even work 1/3 of the day, most people nowadays. And they seek some form of stimulation, as they should. But if you can take a certain view that is a little expanded above the ordinary three-dimensional view, there is really no need, there is no demand, and there is really no expectation for what we could easily call real exciting, surprising information or ideas or speech.